Okay, my friends. Hello, my name's Jenna. Welcome to my channel. My goal with this video is to support you in shifting perspective about your awareness of emotions, how you and others experience emotions to really bring empowerment to your interactions with others and your communication as we are emotional beings. So, I'm going to share why your emotional state is so important and why none of us should be making decisions from an emotionally high or low state, not just from my point of view as an energy healer, but also from human design. And I'll share how to understand emotional energy and to use it to power your life purpose in a sense. So, why listen to me? My name's Jenna, as I said, and part of my life purpose is actually to hold a steady emotional state or frequency to inspire others, and especially when they're feeling down. So I'm like an emotional support buddy, but not a passive one. In human design, my sun sign, for those who are familiar with human design, is 36 too. So like this is what I'm here for. So I'm not going to let you vent, but I will teach and give you powerful and productive ways to channel your emotions towards what it is that you want rather than getting stuck in the discomfort of how you are feeling. So, come along with me on this journey. I often will share personal stories through my own experience or the stories of other people, people I've worked with, or people I've come across in my life to help you bring like practical experience to like human design theory, let's say. Um, so kind of a meeting of an example and the knowledge in a sense. And today I'm going to help you understand a bit more about emotional energy and how to use it. So I did an informal poll with some people to understand what they thought of when I said emotional. And while this list is not conclusive, it does spread across a few different ages, cultures, first language backgrounds, and locations, but it's all women. So keep that in mind. But these are some of the things that came up when they heard emotional. So this includes sad, tears, frustration, like wavy, unstable, lost, vulnerable, raw, real, resistance, fighting, fear, tears, high and low waves, and grief. So out of this entire list, which again is obviously not conclusive, there are only a couple that could even be maybe seen as positive. And I find this interesting because if I were to ask myself the same question, I probably would think of some negative connotation. And I get this because at least in the English language, emotional has this negative connotation. So, oh, you're too emotional, negative connotation. Oh, this was so emotional, negative connotation. Most of the time, it's a negative connotation, and nobody, at least in my experience, and things may be changing, nobody really taught me how to, first of all, think about emotional energy besides being a negative thing, nor how to do anything with it, or that there are even positive aspects to not just feeling positive emotions, but actually using emotions to create positive things or move things in the direction that we want. So I'm going to share some of this with you to help you bridge the gap in a sense between this idea of, okay, there are positive emotions and feelings, and when we have these negative ones, and like how we can kind of bridge that gap so that we're using them rather than being used by them in a sense. So as an energy healing practitioner, a teacher, and a human design enthusiast, what I'm going to share with you is mostly these experiences, these examples, so that you can learn from the chaos that I've lived or that other people have lived and focus on those positive aspects and that wisdom that'll take you forward. So, the way that I think of emotions now, whether or not they are positive or negative, are a signal. And usually, well, I speak for myself, but think about your own experience. Do you actually take action on things unless you're feeling uncomfortable to the point where you can't stand it anymore? So think about that. I know that for me, this can be a pattern. It's like, I don't want to do anything about anything until I'm to the point of feeling really uncomfortable where I need to. So we can think of emotions also in this way. When these emotions start to get pretty uncomfortable, they're often a sign that some kind of shift or change is needed. So this could be a shift in the thought process, energy, actions. It could be many different things. So think of emotions, whether they are positive or negative, as some kind of signal. So what can we do with this signal? How do we work with it? So in human design, there is approximately, let's say, half of the population that has what's called a defined emotional solar plexus. So if you have a body graph chart, which I'll just show you an example of one, where it says ESP, that is the triangle for the emotional solar plexus. So if like this one, it's white, it means that you have an open emotional solar plexus. If it is colored, which I believe will probably be brown, then you have a defined emotional solar plexus. And I believe you have an undefined one when it's white, but you may have some hanging gates. So you may have some of those numbers that are colored in and have like a little tail in a sense. So this is an overview about what in human design different emotional energetic experiences are available. So there are these three different ones, let's say. Now, they say that about half the population has a defined emotional solar plexus, or maybe they have an emotional authority. That means that approximately half of the population does not. So just knowing this in a sense can help you open your perspective to how people experience emotions. And I'll go into what that can look like. So we are all emotional beings. We all experience emotions, but we experience them in a different way. And knowing how people experience them differently may help you interact in a better or a more communicative way. So if you are like me and you have a defined emotional solar plexus, so whether or not your authority is emotional, you are going to experience emotional energy in a very consistent way. Now, that consistent may look different from person to person. So, what's consistent for you may be different from me or other people, but it means that you have this consistent access to this energy. And the emotional solar plexus is actually a motor. So, it's one of the motors. I believe the motors in human design centers are the heart and will center, the root, the sacral, and the emotional solar plexus. Now, the emotional solar plexus is a motor that like almost has like these pulses and waves. It's not like always on, but it delivers this emotional energy and pulses. And so those who have a defined emotional solar plexus will experience their emotions in waves. There are a couple different waves. There's, I believe, tribal, individual, and collective. I have a collective one. So my wave may look different from somebody else's who has a defined emotional solar plexus as well. So again, this in general, with maybe even not understanding any of this, will signal to you that, okay, I experience them differently from others. So that's something just to keep in mind. All right. So those are people who have a defined solar plexus. Then there are people who have either an open solar plexus with no gates defined, or undefined solar plexus, which means they might have a couple of hanging gates. That means that for the most part, a lot of the emotional energy that they experience will be from other people. Okay, so these are people who could be referred to as empaths. They feel the emotional energy of other people. Whereas I, as a defined emotional solar plexus energy type, feel other people's energies, but almost as like a projection because I'm very sensitive. So I feel it as a projection, but not like within me, as in I'm feeling somebody else's emotion as my own in a sense. So you can imagine that if you've never learned about this before, and you can now look up your emotional definition and notice which camp you're in. Are you the side that it has a very defined emotional energy, or are you on experiencing an emotions like an empath? So that in itself can bring huge awareness to how you interact with yourself and your emotions and with other people. So again, regardless of whatever definition you have, you are experiencing emotions and need to process them. So now that we've kind of made clear that there are different ways to experience emotions, and there may be kind of like this 50-50 proximate split of how we do that, we now need to figure out, like, what do we do? How do we deal with this? So the first thing that I would say is that making decisions either from our heads or when we're experiencing high emotion is generally not advised, right? It's not how we're meant to. So for somebody who has a splenic authority, they can make instinctual and timely decisions in the moment. For somebody who has a sacral authority, they also can kind of tap into their body with these yes or no kind of knowings and questioning of themselves and make a decision that's rather timely. Then there are people who have another authority like self-projected, which means they need to talk things out. So again, it's not really an emotional decision-making process. Or other people who have mental authority or ego authority when they're listening to their heart. But again, maybe it's not so emotional. Um, and then there's emotional authority when people who have this definition have to or are advised to make their decisions not from the high or the low state, but in a state of almost emotional neutrality. And that can take time. So you can see that people, we're all emotional beings. We all experience emotions, but the way we make decisions depending on our energy can be completely different. Yet, none of us should be making them from the high or low states of emotional experience, right? Okay, so that's something to clear up too. Also, if you're a reflector and you have lunar authority, again, that's another slow moving authority in a sense, where you somebody who's a reflector may need an entire lunar cycle to go through and experience their decision from different energetic viewpoints in a way. So we are all these emotional beings. So check in with your human design chart. If you don't have one, you can go to some place like genetics matrix, I think, and see, and you'll see in the body chart if you have that emotional definition or not. And that can really support you in how you make both your decisions, but also interact with others. All right. So what else is interesting to know about emotional energy? So as an energy healing practitioner, I know and have experienced that, like, we are the sum of all of our energy. And that energy sum of what we carry is what basically gets radiated out from us. So think about if you are out of emotional alignment, whether that's, defined or undefined, you're going to be radiating out some type of emotional energy, maybe known or unknown, and that may or may not be taken in by somebody else and experienced by somebody else. So let me give you an example. So let's say there's a situation, and in this situation, there is an emotionally defined person, and they're feeling a bit unclear about a decision. And there's a splenic person, so a person with a splenic authority, and maybe a person with a sacral authority. Maybe those two have an emotional solar plexus that is defined, or maybe they don't. So they're feeling and they're experiencing, or they're not, the discomfort of this person who has the emotional solar plexus defined. Okay. So they're picking up on that energy. And if they're not quite in alignment and they get influenced by that emotional energy, they may try to make an emotional decision, maybe. Um, but it's not necessarily the right one for them because maybe they're meant to make an instinctual decision, or maybe they're meant to listen to their body and see if it's saying yes or no, instead of making those based on the emotions that somebody else is feeling. So there are consequences to that, regardless of whether you're a defined emotional solar plexus person or not. So it's something to keep in mind. If you're making decisions from your authority, in essence, you can't really go wrong. But if you're being influenced by other people's emotional energy and making your decisions from that, it could not be the best decision for you. And this is really fascinating to me, at least, because, and I hope it's fascinating for you, because a lot of the advertising that gets used in our world today is often based on an emotional appeal. So that's why we can actually practice using our authority by sometimes watching these kinds of things or listening to these commercials or advertisements or whatever. And instead of making those by being told, using this emotional tactic, you can feel inside yourself with whatever your authority is and make the best decision for you. So that could be a way to like skip emotional manipulation, let's say. So another example could be a child who's actually emotionally undefined or open is acting out, but it's actually likely that they're taking in the emotional energy of somebody else who's probably nearby and amplifying that like crazy. So it could be that they just need to be moved out of that energetic influence so that they can calm down and return to themselves rather than like being punished for acting out. So this could be a situation that comes up. Or there could be, and this could be adults too, right? Or this could be a child or adult that it's experiencing either a high or a low end of their emotional wave as being an emotionally defined, having that solar plexus defined. And maybe they just need some time to be alone to move through, like allow that to move through them without thinking that there's something wrong with them. Or maybe they need to do some movement, like move their body, dance, exercise, or listen to some uplifting music to help them move through that emotional wave that's not meant to last forever. So there's so many different ways that we can use our emotional energy and be empowered by it rather than, feeling all of the chaos and thinking that there's actually nothing we can do. So my encouragement to you is to use your emotions to decipher how you're really feeling. Is it really you that's feeling it? Is it somebody else? uh do you want to feel something instead? And generally that's the case, right? Is like there's something else, and that something else can help accelerate your emotional alignment. So I'm going to give you a few tips on what you can also do to help accelerate your own emotional alignment. So the first one is to understand your definition, your human design emotional solar plexus definition. So which kind of camp are you in? Are you more of the empathic with it being white, or is it defined where you will be experiencing your own emotional waves and the energy will be pretty consistent? So, another thing that's really important to help bring you into your empowerment with this emotional energy is to practice. And I say practice because it's not a perfect. Practice your emotional, or not your emotional, practice your authority all the time rather than making decisions from emotional or other influences, regardless of how you're feeling. So let's go back to that example before. So let's say that person in that kind of group of three who had a splenic or the sacral authority, and let's say they had an open emotional solar plexus so they could feel the emotions of that other person, but instead of caving into those emotions to make a decision, they're like, no, my spleen's telling me we got to do this, or my body, my sacral is telling me like this is the better decision. So really noticing that and still acting from your authority rather than that emotional energy. And the other thing too is to kind of mm, release that failure energy. So if you have made a decision under the influence, maybe even not knowingly, of somebody else's emotions or not an emotional state that's neutral, or not paying attention to your sacral and making it with your mind, like allow yourself to release the failure of those and, accept the consequences of whatever happened and rally for your next decision making attempt. So I'll give you an example. As an emotional divine being, as a kid, I kind of knew this or learned this before I knew about human design, kind of by trial and error. So eventually I came to the conclusion that when I have an emotional outburst or an really emotional intensity, that is really not the moment to say something, make a decision, act out, whatever. Because what I did is I would do that, it would happen, and it would not turn out the way that I wanted or hoped. And so over time, having these kind of experiences, I learned, okay, I know I should not be making decisions or saying something to somebody while I'm feeling the height of it, because maybe 10 minutes later, I'll be like, but I'd have to deal with the consequences of that outburst. Okay, so that could be an example. Ah, if you do have an emotional authority like me, it means making decisions from neutrality. So don't allow people to pressure you into making decisions when you're not quite there at that neutrality. So take some time to get that. So what else can you do? I have a manifestor energy. And so I have learned now that it's really important for me to inform people. But this doesn't always necessarily apply to manifestors when it comes to making your decisions. This could also apply to reflectors and other people who need a longer time to make them. So I often will tell people, hey, let me get back to you when I'm feeling clear. Or, hey, I'm not really in a great place to make a decision right now. Can I get back to you? So I let people know that I'm not going to be making a decision at the moment, or it would be better for me not to make a decision in the moment so that I can take time and feel really good about that decision making. So I let people know ahead of time, usually, so that they're not waiting and waiting and waiting. And I do what I can to help them also kind of relax and let them know that I'll make a decision when it's good for me to do that. So if you have a reflector type, you may need to tell people, hey, like, I need to take a month to make this big decision, and just allow that space for yourself. Or maybe you have a sacral authority and you're like, you know what? Like, this is not the right decision for me. So instead of focusing on those emotional decision making, you're really making it from the place and that energy that you should be. So that's another example of how you can use emotional energy to be empowered and make decisions. And you're aware, but you're not necessarily giving into that to that in a sense. Okay. So I've talked a little bit about what you can do or what I've done as a person who has a defined emotional solar plexus. But what if you don't have it defined? Like, what are some things that you can do to empower yourself? So, again, I do not have an open or an undefined emotional solar plexus, but I've worked with a lot of people who have them. They've told me some of their experiences, so I can pass some of these on to you. So, uh, one of the things that you can do to help empower yourself as a person who does not have this emotional solar plexus defined is that you can start paying attention to when you know that you need to excuse yourself from an intense face to face or even an online discussion. Because what happens is you may be triggered by one or more emotionally intense people, and if you are not able to de-escalate that, you may just need to step out of that energy so that you can calm yourself down and then return when you're centered again. And sometimes this can work, as in, like, sometimes people will understand that you need to excuse yourself and come back, but it's also something that you can inform people of. It's like, you know what, like, give me a moment, like, step away, make an excuse, go to the bathroom, whatever, so that you can come back into your own energy and be like, okay. And that could even be coming back into the energy of making your own decision, you know? So that could be an actual physical thing that you can do. Or maybe it's like leaving a call and coming back, because energy doesn't really know bounds, right? Or in a sense. So another thing you can do is, if you don't have an emotional solar plexus defined, is you can take a moment when you're feeling something and really tap into whether that's yours or not. Okay. So, did it come out of nowhere? Did somebody just walk into the room and all of a sudden you're in a bad mood? Or maybe you're super, super happy. Um, yeah, just notice how interacting with other people shifts your mood, in a sense, shifts your feelings, because those will probably not be yours. Once you recognize whether they're yours or not, you can actually make a decision on what you can do. So if it's not something comfortable, you can consciously tell yourself, even within your head, like, I'm letting go of what's not mine. Like, I'm letting go of what's not mine. You could have a mantra, you could chant it, you can do whatever you need to do, and then allow yourself to be supported in letting that energy go. If you work with, spirit guides, mentors, other guides that are in the invisible realms, you can ask them for help too. Be like, hey, this is way too intense. Like, let's tone it down a notch. So you can try that. Another thing you can do is you can feel into that even more. So those emotions that you are feeling, you can use it and gain some wisdom. So if somebody is saying something, but you're feeling something that's completely different and there's a disconnect, what you are feeling is probably the truth of what they're experiencing. It's not necessarily yours, but you may be able to use that in a sense to be like a lie detector. So somebody recently was just telling me, like, I can tell when somebody's saying something, but what they're feeling is completely different. So this, in a sense, could be like a superpower. You can kind of tap into the truth of, like, what somebody's experiencing, what they're telling you versus what they are feeling, and come to your own conclusion, or come to your own, communication tactics based on that wisdom that you're experiencing. So those are a couple ideas for those who do not have a defined solar plexus. So, what about both types? The next few suggestions I'm going to share are for both. So it's really useful for everyone to move their body despite emotional energy. We all know that like exercise in general is good for us, but it also helps to move energy. So if you can move it, your body can process it and you can allow yourself to do this in your favorite way. Another thing that can be supportive is grabbing yourself a set of guidance or oracle cards or tarot if you use them. And you can use them to help you decipher what kind of emotional energy is you're experiencing, whether it's yours, whether it's not yours, whether it can help validate what something you're feeling, because energy doesn't lie. So if you that's why they say like if you pull a card, like don't be trying to shove it back in the deck because that's influenced by energy. Okay. So you can use that in a sense to understand what you're experiencing. You can ask specific questions or you can ask about, the energy versus what you're hearing and kind of just get the energy's perspective in a sense. So I find that to be hugely useful, whether you have a defined or undefined solar plexus. And then the last example that I have for really empowering yourself to use emotional energy and be more of a master of it than be, like a slave to it is you can use the certain techniques to process it. So you could use tapping. I don't personally use tapping, but I know that a lot of people find it really useful. I have done it. I have used it many years ago. These days I use emotion code. So emotion code is something you can actually learn for yourself. So I actually learned emotion code and used it on myself before I got certified and started helping others. Some people don't like to use it because they feel like it's too hard to learn how, but you can do it. So if you want a way to empower yourself and you're the kind of like I like to do it myself type, you can learn how to use emotion code. And if you're not sure what that is, you can also Google that or research that and find out how to do that. So those are some ways that both types can really tap into the wisdom of emotional energy and process it rather than be at the mercy of it. So I'm going to give you a few more conclusions from my point of view as an energy healer, mentor, and teacher. So, working with myself, working with other people's emotional energies, here are some conclusions I think that you will find interesting that I came up with based on my experience. All right. So, one, I kind of shared a little bit about this. As a person with a defined emotional solar plexus, I'm not actually an empath. And that I didn't know for a long time, but I still feel the projected emotions of others. So it's almost like I feel them coming towards me, or I could feel when a situation is heated, even though it's there and not here. And I didn't realize that was not being empathic, but it's not. So there's a little bit of a difference between being sensitive and being empathic. So I have also defined spleen with certain splenic, certain gates defined. So I'm extremely intuitive. And so I sometimes thought that intuition was in a sense being empathic, but it was a little different. So I can sense the energy, but it doesn't mean that it's mine coming from within. But that doesn't mean it doesn't affect me. Sometimes it can affect me really deeply. But again, it's not like I'm not taking it on or feeling it as mine. So that's one thing. Um, Now, feeling and identifying with an emotion, or maybe not always identifying with a bit of focus and shifting your focus to how you want to feel instead is an incredibly powerful quantum energy shift technique that anyone can do. So, your energy focus is really powerful. So when you notice that you are experiencing, whether it's yours or others, some type of intense emotion, bringing your focus to it, accepting it, either asking it to like move right along, or tapping into the feeling of what you really want instead is really powerful. And you can do that if you can focus, you can do that whenever you need to support yourself. And I'll help you do that in a little exercise at the end of this. Um, Another conclusion that I've come to understand is that sometimes emotional energy can be stuck within us and it affects us from the subconscious level in different ways. So I'm going to give you a couple examples of these different ways and see if you can identify them or recognize if somebody else you know may be experiencing this. Okay, so one is experiencing and getting emotions absorbed from somebody else. So this can happen whether you're defined or undefined in the emotional solar plexus. Because what I actually do is I release emotions from people that have gotten stuck as energy that's affecting them somehow in a way that they don't want. And I can tap into whether these emotions were theirs to begin with or if they absorbed them from somebody else. Now, while that doesn't change the fact that they need to be released, it does help the mind kind of understand, okay, like what's going on? Like, am I taking on other people's stuff or am I just feeling something so strongly that it gets stuck within me myself? So that's something really interesting. So again, you can absorb and get your own emotions stuck. So if you're not able to process your own emotions in a healthy way, which sometimes we can't, maybe due to trauma or some things, we can actually absorb our own emotions and get those stuck. And then those can start affecting us and our bodies in a way that's not useful. Another way that energies can get stuck is if they're passed down through the generations, kind of like through genetics in a sense. So maybe your great grandma or your grandma or whoever down the line, both sides of the family experienced an emotion that was really intense. It got stuck within them. They had one of your parents, and your parents carried that on without releasing it, and then it passed on to you. So that's often how they say, oh, this stops with me. If you know how to process that emotional energy, things that have gotten stuck inside, you can actually make that stop with you and not pass that on. And you can also clear out the energy of like those generations. So that's another really interesting way of how we can inherit like different types of energies. Another experience could be having emotional energy affect us from a different lifetime. Now, you don't necessarily have to believe in this or not. Um, I do angelic Reiki and I've experienced past life regressions. I've experienced some quantum healing hypnosis techniques. So I've done a couple different things and I've worked with others. And sometimes this energy, which we can only do something about in the present, right? So it doesn't matter if you believe in past lives or not, that energy is here in our energy fields in the present. And that's where we have to release it from. So while it's interesting for the mind to know, okay, this energy might be really old or from a different experience or something like that, it still needs to be dealt with now. But that I know for me helped me to understand some emotional energy that I just didn't know where it was coming from. I didn't know why this pattern kept repeating, and that could be why. Let me give you another example. I once did a healing for for a young child, and this boy, his mom was explaining that he sometimes would just cry, like, out of nowhere, just to sob and be so sad, and she was like, "I can't figure out where this is coming from, like, it seems so intense, but he's so young, like, And so she, started kind of collecting some of these stories or experiences based on how he would act. And as we were doing this healing session for him, it became really clear that this energy had been influenced by a previous experience, and that this experience he in a different lifetime, let's say, experienced extreme grief through loss. And so it started making sense what his mom had said, like how he behaved, but just having no idea where it was coming from. So we released that energy from the now moment, and we were able to release the cause of those emotional outbursts, let's say. So if you notice somebody close to you or yourself having an experience that doesn't quite match with maybe the present life experiences, it could be that it's old energy. Okay. So another could be experiencing energy or having an emotional reaction to something that's getting triggered from, you know, an old soul experience. So these are different ways that you can experience emotional energies, yet the origins may be from something completely unknown. And you don't necessarily have to know to release it, but I know for the mind, it can kind of bring relief to understand that, hey, there is a reason why you're experiencing this, and you can use it again as a sign to let it get your attention, but to allow it to release and to go. So I'm not leading you up to all of this and leaving you hanging. So what I really enjoy doing is bringing through these song baths, and I use my voice, and this energy helps to shift what needs to be shifted based on your intention and based on the energy. So I want to do a song bath to help all of you watching to align with your own emotional energy, your own emotional experience. So clearing away maybe stuff that's not yours, clearing away maybe stuff that is yours, but you're like, I don't know how to get rid of it. And so I'm going to bring you through a mini meditation to help you direct the energy in a positive way. So take a moment to notice and recognize what your emotional state is right now. So, is there a feeling that comes to mind? Or if you think about a challenge in your life right now, how does that make you feel? What does that trigger? We're not going to spend too long on that, but it does help bring out of the subconscious, like, how am I feeling? Remember, I talked about how focus can be really powerful. So when you have that emotion, and maybe, I don't know, for an example, it could be lack. Let's say you're feeling lack, but you're like, where is this coming from? So tap into that lack, and then think about what you want to experience instead of that lack. So this could look very differently for different people. Maybe instead of lack, it's abundance. Maybe it's being energized. Maybe it's being taken care of. It could be a number of different things. So whatever that is that you want, you're going to tap into the feeling of what it is that you want. Okay? And once you are pretty clear on what it is you want to feel, you're going to either imagine, sense, intend, feel, or pretend that that emotion is now in your heart space. So you can close your eyes if you want, if that helps you to focus. So again, you don't have to feel it. You can also intend it or imagine or pretend. So once you feel like it's pretty set, you've got your focus there. You're going to then allow that feeling or that energy, that visualization to grow. So you're going to imagine that it's becoming more and more intense in a positive way, though. More, you're going to allow it to grow and allow it to expand. And then once you feel that it's too big to fit in your heart space anymore, you're going to let it go. You're going to let it kind of burst out of that heart space like a firework or a starburst or something. And then just let it go. So that's going to help guide this energy towards what it is that you want. So now you can kind of just relax, listen, and let the energy move you. Here we go.
Ooh, yeah, ooh, yeah, ooh, yeah, ooh, yeah, ooh, yeah. Ah, yeah, me, ah, ooh, yeah, ooh, yeah. Ah, ooh, yeah, yeah, ooh, yeah. Ah, yeah, ooh, yeah. Hey, ah, oh, hey, ah, hey, ah, oh, hey, ah, oh, hey, ah, hey, ah, hey, ah, oh, hey, hey, ah, hey. I hey ya way 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 hey way way way
So there you are. Notice how you're feeling. Notice your emotional state. Has it shifted? Did you feel something move inside your body? Is your thought process a little different than it was a few moments ago? So notice where that energy went or what shifted. You can leave a comment below. I love hearing how people experience it because it's often so different. And let me know. Yeah, leave a comment below. You can also um, leave a comment about something else you want to experience or know about dealing with emotional energy and using it for your empowerment. And you probably know now what you don't want based on your emotions. But if you're still uncomfortable with asking for what you want, check out this other video that I have for you. And with that, I say, have a great day or night wherever you are in the world. And bye for now.